Hello, my name's Tom Salmon. I'm a security consultant with LogRhythm. What I'd like to show you today is an example of what LogRhythm can do for endpoint security. Specifically, I'm going to show you an example of how we can detect a phishing attack that turns into a compromise. We'll show you an active demo of what an attacker would do, and then we'll go to LogRhythm and show you what you'd see from the alarms and the forensic investigation. Okay, let's get started. So what I've done is I've RDP'd into a desktop right now. I'm connected to a machine that would be a normal endpoint in your environment, such that someone's using Outlook, they're receiving their emails normally. What we're going to do is launch a phishing attack. I'm going to use this script that I made earlier. I'm going to send myself an email that looks normal, but actually contains a malicious payload. The use case here is that if we send enough emails to enough people in your organization, eventually someone will open one of those emails. So here we go. Status update for a tracking number. Really commonly sent, really easy to find. With it is an attachment. If I open the attachment, it looks normal. It looks like a regular email that would have an invoice inside of it, and it doesn't look suspicious at all. What we can see, however, is actually inside that attachment, we can see there's actually a particular vulnerability bundled in this PDF. We know this version of Adobe Reader has a vulnerability inside of it. We know there's a 0-day, and we've put that malicious payload inside the PDF. It hasn't popped up any notices, it hasn't popped up any warnings, and our antivirus hasn't flagged it because it isn't set up at the moment to see that particular vulnerability. All it's done in the background is launched a couple of 100 bytes payload that's talking back to a command and control server that we own. All it's saying is, hey, I'm online, I'm here, I'm talking back to you, what shall I do next? If I was the recipient of this email and I saw the tracking update, I'd see it and I wouldn't really pay much attention to it. I might delete the email and actually say, well, nothing really happened. If we look on the left-hand side at my script, what you can see as I highlight is malware callback received. The command and control server we're in control of has now been talked back to, and this PC has started its infection. The second step is I'm going to tell our command and control server to become persistent. I want it to take a step to make sure that we can keep on coming back to this PC. In the process, what's happening is we're leaving a footprint behind. With LogRhythm, we can optionally deploy agents across the network. Agents are really useful for frontline staff and executives and call centers. What they can do is they can monitor for file integrity monitoring changes, something in the Windows system file that changes. They can look for registry changes, and they can see abnormal network activity. In the process of installing our malware kit, what we've left behind is we've written files to disk. We've had to create an auto-run registry key so that the process can start up at boot time, and we've created a new service that now starts and stops with this PC. In all, we've left 3 or 4 logs behind that can be picked up by LogRhythm, classified and categorized so you can see what's actually happening. The next step, if I was a real attacker, would be trying to understand what's around this PC. So what I'm doing is I'm scanning the network. Right now, I'm just on a desktop, and it probably doesn't contain that much data. But around this desktop is probably file servers, Active Directory, and a wealth of information that I can access based on network rules and policy and access, depending on my job function. What I want to do is find out where they are, what they do, and what they contain. The result of my network scan has brought back 3 different servers, all running SSH. From a network perspective, what LogRhythm has just seen is a local network sweep. We've seen simultaneous connections going across the local subnet on a range of different ports very rapidly, and it's very easy to identify this kind of traffic as doing a port scan. From the 3 SSH servers we identified, what we're going to do is try and brute force them. So we're going to try the default accounts, root, admin, password 1, password 2. In a real scenario, I would have gone on LinkedIn. I would have found out who are the people that have got these accounts, which football team do they support, which brand of car do they drive, to try and make it slightly more focused. In this case, it's quite a dumb attack. I'm trying the default credentials. What LogRhythm is doing is building up a picture. We've seen the changes on the desktop. We've seen the network-based port scans coming from this particular machine, and now we're seeing lots of network activity coming from this machine on an unusual port to a service producing lots of failed logons. We've got to the point where we've produced so many logs that represent so much risk, LogRhythm's taken an automatic action. We've got a system called Smart Response. What that does is it talks to other systems around it, and it makes the system quarantined. So in this case, we've talked to the local Windows firewall, and we've put a blocking rule in, such that this PC can no longer talk to that SSH server we were trying to brute force before. As someone using the PC, this is completely invisible to me. No one's seen the change, no one's noticed the malware being installed, and also no one's stopped me containing the threat as well. In real time, automatically, I've stopped this from progressing further. So what we'll do now is we'll flip over to LogRhythm and we'll see what it's been telling us, and we'll investigate what's just happened. So I'll close my session and I'll bring up the LogRhythm web console. What we can see is multiple different events coming together to show us where this came from. The most interesting one right now is at the top left, 97% risk. One of the really nice things that I find about LogRhythm is that every single alarm has a percentage risk score against it. If it's relatively low risk, it might get 20 or 30%. If it's very, very significant, it's going to get 97. I know from being a SOC analyst myself that anything over 90% needs to be investigated quickly and needs to be resolved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a case, an investigation around what's been happening. To the left side of every single screen, there's the Cases tab. If we pop this open, we can build a new case. We can give it a title, so we're going to say Suspicious Host. We can give it a priority as well, and say, okay, I believe this is a priority 1. Very, very significant that something's been happening. I can save the case and start my investigation. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to collect evidence. I'm trying to look for logs. I'm trying to look for information. I can upload files and add notes into it to tell me what's been happening. Usually what will happen is that I'll look at this alarm, I'll add it into my evidence locker by clicking on the little briefcase icon, and that will send it over here into my current case. And if there's related alarms, I could add maybe 2 or 3 of them together. For the time being, I'm going to close out the case and I'm going to look at the alarm itself. So the 97% alarm, which was fired from the activity that we did, I want to drill down. The title gives me an overview of roughly what might have happened. What I want to know is all the details below it. I want LogRhythm to go away, bring back every log and everything related to what just happened, so I can see from a forensic perspective what's been going on. LogRhythm's pretty fast. The results are already back, so we can click on them and see a summary of what results we've got, the logs that were generated, and exactly what this host has been up to. One of the things you'll focus on a lot with LogRhythm is what we call a common event. The common event is a classification that tells you what's been happening inside these log messages. The idea is that you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to understand Windows event IDs. You don't need to understand Cisco event IDs. We tell you in plain English what has been happening. Is it a port scan? Is it a configuration change? At the bottom of every screen, there's a logs button. If we click on that, it brings up what we call the mega grid. And this is in-depth information into all the changes that were happening. If we look at our common events right in the middle of the screen here, we can see the summary of events that just occurred. We can see suspected phishing activity. We can see the registry key that was changed. We can see the port scan. We can see lots of events coming from this host which we found suspicious, and the brute force attack. With the registry key, what I can do is I can focus on it and look at the details that LogRhythm has extracted from the logs that came in. We can see the host that it came from and the host that it came to, in this case itself. We can see the classification that LogRhythm gave it. We understand that this is a registry key change. We know what it means based on the event ID and where it came from. We've got over 250,000 processing rules that really understand in depth many different systems. If I scroll down, I can actually get to the details and see, in particular, this specific registry key was changed, this particular value was placed inside of it, and we rated that 68% risky based on the content of that change. If you want to, from a forensic perspective, you can get right down to the log message itself and see the details as it was produced on that source system. Usually what I'd be doing now as an analyst is I'd be looking at the host itself and understanding what else has happened. So here we can see the impacted host was workstation 6. On every field, there's a cog icon. A cog means to do a pivot, and what you're saying is, I want to see what else it's been up to. So I can see, right, this is the host that was changed. This is what was going on. I can choose to look at everything that came from or went to this host for an hour before this particular event. What LogRhythm will do is it will go to all of our log sources from all of the different systems, firewalls, routers, switches, domain controllers, application servers, bring back every single message that was related to this particular host for an hour before this change occurred. If we look at the results, we can then see a summary of everything that happened. Who was active, what were they doing, what were they changing. From here, I can get a pretty good perspective of what people have been up to and what actually has been changed on the system and what kind of events have occurred. Again, what we're going to focus on is the common event, what has changed. One of the nice things about LogRhythm is it's a very real-time, very dynamic interface. I can stretch things around, resize it, rescale it, and see the information that I need. What I'm interested in here is seeing who did it. So we can see a user logon. If we double click on the user logon, it will drill down into the information. We can look at the user and see which particular user was logged into this host at the time this attack occurred. What I want to do now is gather this evidence and put it inside my case locker. Left-hand side of the screen, again, open the Cases tab. It remembers what we've been doing, so it can see the case that we started with and the same relevant alarms, and I can add these logs into this case. I click on Add Logs, I can say Related User Logons to Affected Desktop. Save this information and add it into my case. Now when someone else investigates this case, they can see where did I start, what was my alarm for the starting point, and what else did I gather on the side, what's related to the actual problem that's going on here. If we go back to the main LogRhythm interface, we can see a summary of all of the cases that have been generated. We can see everything that's been opened, everything we found significant that became an investigation, and metrics around how many were high priority, how many were low priority, and where did they come from. So here we can see a nice trend of how many cases were opened, how many were closed, what was the priority breakdown, how many were high priority, how many were low priority, and how many cases became incidents. We consider an incident a case that is real. We've qualified it, we've investigated it, we believe it to be significant risk actually posing a threat to something. If I look at the case that I've just opened, so suspicious host, you can find out how long it's been open for and who's been working on it. So here we can see in the last 5 minutes as I've been talking, I've been active on this host and all the details that I've collected. What I'm normally going to do is add a collaborator. So I can choose one of my colleagues, choose his name from the list that we synchronize from Active Directory, and add him in as a collaborator. He'll get an email saying, hey, Tom Salmon needs some help. He's working on a case. Here's what he's done so far. Please can you log in and review the evidence? He can look at the same things that I've seen, and we can work together to resolve it. Commonly this will bring in a network team or bring in the infrastructure team to help you resolve the problem until it's finally finished, and we can mark it as a closed case, update the metrics, and then you can see on the management dashboard how quickly and how many cases became closed. Thanks for watching.